everyone, my name is Glenda with SureFit Designs, sometimes referred to as Glenda the Good Stitch. In this Make It Sew beginner sewing series, the next lesson I'm going to teach you is how to set in a sleeve in a woven garment. I have my sample set up and prepared here. Let's talk about the sleeve for just a moment. When you've got your sleeve cut, you're going to see a double notch at the back of the sleeve, and that's going to refer to the back of the bodice. The notch at the top is the sleeve cap notch, which always connects with the shoulder seam, and the single notch in the front is obviously the front notch. So fronts of our bodices have single notches and the backs have double notches. Now, I'm going to show you a technique that I've used for years and years and years, and of course with anything, when you've done it a million times, that's what you're most comfortable with. There are obviously other ways to set a sleeve in besides what I'm going to show you. But if you don't have a preferred technique, please try this one. We are going to work with the sleeve in a flat format first of all, and I'm going to take the sleeve and take it to the sewing machine, and I'm going to put 2 rows of ease stitches in it. Now, ease stitching is similar to a basting stitch insofar as you are going to make the stitch length longer so that you can ease the thread or ease the fabric up on the thread. And you're going to ease from notch to notch from the front to the back. The first row of ease stitching is going to be done a hair over the 5/8 inch marking, and so I've just got it positioned on my machine. Again, if you want to mark this with a piece of blue painter's tape, feel free to do that. You might want to have your needle in the down position as you're doing this curved row of stitching, just so that you can pivot when you need to. You don't want to backstitch because you're going to be pulling these threads up, and leave your threads long enough to grab onto. The second row of stitching is done at 3/8 of an inch away from the cut edge, and I want to make sure that thread's long enough to pull. There we go. And the edge of my presser foot up to the needle is exactly 3/8 of an inch, so I'm going to use that as my guide. And now I have 2 rows of ease stitches. And you can see that just because of the tension on the machine, that's starting to ease up just a little bit. The one thing that you want to avoid is over gathering when you ease a sleeve in. Now I need to do the underarm seam. And so we're now forming it into a 3-dimensional form. And I did mark the wrong side with an X so that I know that I am now placing right sides of the fabric together. And I'll just start down at the hemline. And now this is regular stitch length. And because it's a normal seam, I am going to do 12 stitches. Actually, it's 2.5 stitches. 2.5 millimeters is regular stitch length, is what I wanted to say. And I will back stitch that. And you will want to press this seam open. Because you've now got a tube, it's going to be easiest to press this over a seam roll or a sleeve board. If you have a sleeve board, that works well too. And I'll remove that other sleeve out of the line of vision just for this example. Now we obviously have to turn that to the right side. And now the orientation to get the sleeve into the bodice. It's very easy to do this. You have the right side of your bodice face out, and you will notice that the shoulder seam is sewn and the side seam is sewn, and there is the right side of the sleeve. Now, single notch goes to single notch. Single notch at the top goes to the shoulder seam. And right sides will be together. So that's what it will look like when it's done. So there's your orientation. The easiest way to get all of this in your hands is to take, in my case, my left hand, and I get my fingers ready to grab this. I'm going to put the sleeve in place. I'm going to put right sides together, and now holding it all as one unit, I'm going to flop the shoulder line over top of the sleeve, and now I will start pinning from the inside. So as I said, that single notch at the top of the cap indicates the shoulder seam, and you'll pin down both of your seam allowances so that they don't fold over on themselves when you are stitching this. Then go to the underarm and pin your side seam of the bodice to the underarm of the sleeve itself. And you do want to make sure that your seam allowances are one right on top of the other. And I'm going to put one pin right here to hold this, but I'd like to show you another very handy pin that quilters use. This is a clover forked pin, and I'm actually going to take this and I'm going to pin these seam allowances together down here to hold them in place. And I don't want to remove that pin, so it's going to stabilize those two seam allowances as I go around attaching this sleeve. Now you'll then match the double notches at the back and the single notches at the front. I do tend to use a lot of pins when I'm setting in a sleeve. And again, as I said, you may have your own technique to do this. Now you're going to gently pull up your ease stitches, and you only pull them up enough so that you don't have gathers in the top of the sleeve. So just take the two threads together and gently ease the fullness of the cap like this towards the sleeve cap knot. And because the outer circle or the outer edge is a little bit fuller, I may take just that thread and ease that fullness up too. What you don't want to do is ease the bodice onto the sleeve. You're easing the sleeve onto the bodice. So we're just going to distribute this fullness towards that sleeve cap. And the reason, of course, for the ease in the sleeve cap is to go over the rounded part of your shoulder. And this is fussy work, so you just have to take your time and do it slowly. Go on to the back of the sleeve cap. Again, take up the two threads and gently, very, very gently, push some fullness along those threads. All right, now the next step is to baste this sleeve in position. And when I do this, I always do it so that I've got the sleeve face up. So let's go to the sewing machine and slip this underneath the presser foot. And I need to take the machine out to basting. That's the longest stitch length that you've got. And now you're stitching with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. And please take your time here. This is just tedious work. It's fussy work. And you've got a narrow area, small circumference that you're stitching within. So you just have to do a little bit at a time. And you need to have your needle in the down position so that as you start moving your fabric, that nothing shifts out of position. Make sure your seam allowances are together. And of course, remove your pins as you sew. And the reason why you did your first line of basting a hair beyond the 5/8 inch line is so that when you actually stitch this line, now attaching the sleeve to the bodice, that you're going right inside on the 5/8 inch stitching line and not catching your basting thread. It'll just make it so much easier to pull it out. And when you get up into the fullness of the cap, you absolutely must make sure that you stop and manipulate the fullness. And if you need to, just slide the little tucks and little puckers out of the way as you baste. And when you come to the end of the basting, you do not need to back stitch. And of course you can see that I'm stitching in a contrasting color of thread so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. So now you need to take it out and you need to look at it and you need to see how it looks. Well, the front side looks pretty good. There's one little stitch that's out of the alignment there. When I look at the back, I've got one very, very tiny little pucker right there. What I would do for this is I would just simply nip that thread right here and release that, because you don't want to have any puckers on the right side or the inside when you're setting in a sleeve. So now let's take this to the right side and take a look at what that looks like. And why it looks a little puckery up here is still because of the ease stitching. I think when I pull that out and when it's pressed, it will all lay really nice and flat. So we'll take a look at the back side, and the back looks good. That's fine. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out that first row of ease stitches right here. I'm just going to pull it out completely to help release those little tucks that we saw. And now let's take a look at that from the right side. And that looks pretty good. You can just see that gentle little bit of fullness that's at the top of the cap, which is of course what is required to go over top of your shoulder curvature. And these are just basting threads from the other line of ease stitches. So that all looks really pretty good. So the next thing that you're going to do is, because you have basted this, now we want to permanently stitch it. And so you'll take this back to your sewing machine and put your machine stitch length on 2.5 millimeters and stitch around it one more time. It'll be a lot easier this time because all your pins are out and all your gathering has been evenly distributed. You still want to stitch with the needle in the down position. And now you will backstitch this. All right, let's take a look at that. I think that turned out looking pretty good. The next step is to trim this and press it over top of your sleeve roll. I didn't mean sleeve roll, your tailor's ham. The little sleeve cap fullness you're seeing provides the shaping to go over the top of your shoulder. That's looking good. And typically you're going to press your seam allowances towards the sleeve. Before I do that though, we need to talk about finishing off this seam allowance. There's a couple of different ways to do it. And one is that you can trim this and then, well actually what I would do is I would stitch it first and then trim it. So that's a double row of stitching and then trimming. Or you could cut this with your pinking shears and then stitch both of your seam allowances together and then again press that towards the inside. Or you could take this to the serger and just serge off the entire edge so that it's a nice, clean looking, neat finish on the inside. Those choices are yours, but when you go to press it after you've finished off the inside of that seam allowance, then of course you're going to take this on the tailor's ham and press toward the sleeve. And there you have a set-in sleeve. In the woven fabric, I will say this, in a woven fabric it is the most difficult sleeve to set in because your woven fabric doesn't give, and that's why you needed those ease stitches. In the next lesson I'm going to talk about putting the sleeve and setting the sleeve in with a knit fabric. I hope you've been enjoying the videos in this Make It Sew Beginners series, and if you have, I would really encourage you to join our SureFit Designs community if you haven't done so already. You can do that in 3 easy steps. Number 1, make sure you go over to surefitdesigns.com and sign up for our newsletter. And when you do, there'll be all kinds of free gifts to get you started. Secondly, you're likely in YouTube watching this right now. Please make sure that you like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's SureFit Designs, and the buttons are below in order to do that. And the third thing is, make sure that you join our SureFit Designs community in Facebook. We have a great active group right now, and seamstresses from all over the world are getting together, sharing their projects, asking questions, supporting one another, and in general, having lots and lots of fun with SureFit Designs. I certainly do invite you to join us.